So apparently even in Eternia they have kitchen utensils. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Turtles, a Grayskull Shredder, evil master of ninjutsu. All Shredder wanted to do was eliminate the Turtles once and for all. Unfortunately, Krang's plan to harness the most powerful force in the universe backfired, and it flung to planet Eternia, where Shredder encounters an interesting new ally. While Saki's making arrangements for brunch with Skeletor, brunch, never heard of brunch? Brunch is not quite breakfast, it's not quite lunch, but it comes with a slice of cantaloupe at the end. You don't get completely what you would get at breakfast, but you get a good meal. Back to the Shredder, you're looking at the figure standing at about 6 inches in height, or Shredder is about 15 centimeters tall. Speaking of meal buddies, here's what the figure looks like with the version 2 Skeletor. Short of little flippy flappies that Skeletor always has in the bottoms of his forearms, the figures are using almost the same bodies. It's funny though that in the stories, the two of these guys are aligning themselves, and yet you would think that Shredder is actually more part of the Horde. The reason why I say that is that Shredder actually comes included with not only the crossbow that got packed originally with Hordak, but he also happens to be sharing Hordak's lower boots as well. Perhaps a twist down the road in the story? We'll just have to wait and check out those mini comics as we get them. Figures we've also had a look at. Here's what the figure looks like with the mindless He-Man, the most mindless man in the universe. And then on this side, we can also bring the heroes in a half shelf, the first wave Leonardo and also the first wave Donatello. You know, I feel maybe unnecessary flack in the direction of the Turtles. I don't maybe love them as much as the stuff that we're getting from the Masters as part of the Turtles of Grayskull line, but the Turtles aren't bad. And I think, honestly, what sold me on the Turtles wasn't so much the first two, the figure that we've had a look at, but it's actually going to be Raphael that makes part of the second wave. Raphael's sporting sort of a Ram Man armor, and I now start to get it. That Leonardo obviously is taking some cues from He-Man. I mean, Donatello takes very heavily influenced armor pieces from Man-at-Arms. Each one of them sort of are sharing some of the armors from other Masters figures. But I think, honestly, it's Raphael that sold me the most on this line. And based on that, and then what we will eventually be getting with Michelangelo, the Turtles aren't bad. Maybe not as cool as what we're getting here with the Masters, at least in my own personal opinion, but they're not bad-looking figures. And again, here's what the figure also looks like. We were just talking about Man-at-Arms, after all. Here's what the figure looks like with that figure from the first wave as well. With the new wave comes a new mini-comic. Just before we look at the mini-comic, I did want to interrupt myself by showing you guys the piece of paper that comes included with Shredder. Shredder, once again, like every other Masters figure, the piece of paper at least gives us necessary instructions. No, it doesn't. Just to tell you that you can pop off the head, swap out the arms, swap the lower half, and then pop off the lower boots if you wanted to, if you want to mix and match this Shredder pieces with other Masters figures. It doesn't even have to really be the ones from Turtles of Grayskull. You can use other Master Universe Origins figures also if you wanted to. I don't have to throw this as far. I mean, I just decided, why don't I just bring the recycling bin a little bit closer to the table? Instead of me trying to chuck this, I mean, you can never really throw a piece of paper. Paper doesn't have any weight behind it. You throw it, it only just falls in front of you. I just instead move the recycling bin. You can't hear it. It's in the recycling bin right now. Boy, that was a lot easier. Let's look at the mini comic now that comes included with the Shredder. The Shredder comes included with Belly of the Beast Man. This now, I think, also gives us a cue as to what Skeletor is going to look like. Skeletor is going to be part, I think, of Wave 3, along with, I believe, Casey Jones, Michelangelo, and Tila. I kept thinking, like, I don't know if Skeletor is going to change all that much, based at least from what we saw in the earlier mini-comic. But, like, if this gives us any idea of what he's going to be looking at now, he kind of looks like some really sick-looking pharaoh. Love the look of that Skeletor, and I can't wait for a figure to him to get released. Also advertised here, there's Beastman, there's Ram Man at the top corner. These are also figures that we're going to be getting as part of this second wave. I don't know if you can also see it. There's also Raphael there too. Flip through quickly the comic. The comic, once again, I really like the look of this. And yet the thing I never really like is still the look of the Turtles. What's going on with the Turtles? Quickly, I'm not going to spend the whole time to actually read this, but I'll read this obviously once. I haven't honestly even read the first comic that we got. My whole real idea is actually just to kind of wait until all the mini comics come out. I'd like to kind of read them all together. I guess it probably would make the most sense just to start reading the comic and, you know, where I leave off, then read the second comic where this is at right now, and then just kind of wait and kind of finish the story as the comics come out. At least then I have some idea of what's going on. You can see there's He-Man. We already got a tease of what that He-Man looked like at the end of the first mini comic. Looks like he's being held back by Rocksteady and Bebop. There's Leatherhead there on the side there as well. That's very cool. And on the back, by the way, is advertised the other figures that make up the second wave: Ram Man, Beastman, Raphael, and Shredder himself. Let's move that mini comic to the side. That mini comic, by the way, I'm sure you'll be seeing several times already because we'll be looking at that the rest of this second wave. But also the other thing that comes included with Shredder is some pretty cool looking accessories. Now, I did already say that he came included with a crossbow for Hordak. It looks to be the exact same one that not only Hordak has had, Leech has also had this sort of crossbow. The crossbow does have somewhat of a functioning gimmick. If you take the two halves, which I've actually already taken them and put them together, but this separates, and that the whole idea is it's supposed to fling forward. You just take this part, and on the back of it, or on the bottom of it, you can see there's a little latch, and the latch fits inside a little looped open area of the plastic. If you push the two back like this, the idea is you're supposed to be able to press the top here, and this flings forward. Even on the original crossbows, they never really worked properly. But again, it gives you a little bit of a gimmick, something that, you know, it's above and beyond just him simply carrying it around as an accessory. The bottom, as you can see, is pretty hollow in plastic. It's quite a lighted accessory. I like the coloring of the plastic, though, so even if I don't decide to use it with Shredder, I could probably use it with one of the Horde members instead. This does clip onto his hand. I mean, it could clip on either side, but considering he already has a very large war axe, I'd probably just decide instead to clip this on this side of his forearm instead. And it just clips on like that. The figure also comes included with a very cool looking axe. The axe itself has been molded in a very nice silver plastic. You can see sort of the way they've indentated the plastic. It looks like it's been hand forged. It looks like it would be very destructive if he was actually swinging this around at somebody. Really nice looking axe though. I wonder if we will see this axe again with a future release, or if this is exclusive. Kind of looking at this, it actually kind of looks like something we may get down the road with like Power Rangers. I don't know. This symbol at the top reminds me of something from Power Rangers. Although this is the same symbol that he happens to have on the front of his chest, so it could be the only time we ever get this axe. I don't know. But it does also fit into his hand, and because he only has one gripping hand, you only have one hand to choose from, then you can have him wielding both his accessories. The figure, I did have to do a little bit of moving things around, unfortunately, because the figure really was having a hard time to stand. One of the things I had already mentioned was the fact that the figure is using the monster feet, or the monster boots here, for Hordak. And unfortunately, if you look at them, Hordak is always one of those figures I've had a hard time to stand. It's just the way they designed his feet. They aren't quite monster feet in the way that Skeletor's feet would be, but they're always these duck-billed, flat feet that all the Horde figures, or most of the figures, tend to have, except for Leech. Leech was kind of the one that still had those suction-cup bottoms. What I ended up having to do was, luckily, the shin guards can be removable. So when I first got this guy out of the packaging, I couldn't even get these feet to budge. I ended up having to heat them up with a little bit of hot water, and finally was able to give them way. You can see by the way they've sculpted the tops. Those are Horak's boots, all right. And again, these just basically clip on plastic, and they just fit over top of the existing boots. But I think the problem with it was that these sat really low down when I got this guy out of the packaging, and then already I wasn't able to move this up and down. So between the two, the figure was having the hardest of times standing. He seems to be standing okay now, though. Head sculpt-wise, I love the look of this Shredder. I would almost even say it's one of my favorite Shredder figures I've gotten in recent memories. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot to choose from when it comes to Shredder figures. I mean, we've got ones from NECA Toys based on the cartoon line. We've got ones obviously based on the movie line. But if you wanted just to kind of get a really neat looking cartoon Shredder, even though this really isn't pulled from a cartoon necessarily, one thing I also really like about it is because he's shirtless, he does remind me of the original Playmates Shredder. Because that Shredder back in the day would have had, like a purple lower half of his body, shirtless on the top, and then he was wearing basically like cape over top of it. He does have a cape. The cape is still made of plastic, though. Even though to look at it, it kind of does look like it's actually a real material. It's attached by the bottom of his bandolier armor. So, like, the armor basically snaps over top of this. And basically, like, if you were to open this up, the cape sits inside of that. And then basically, you know, you would just snap this back in place. You could, if you wanted to, I suppose, take the cape off completely. I think it would just be a case of oh no, it's actually glued at the top there. So yeah, you really wouldn't want to remove that. But for the fact that they actually did it the way that they did, you would almost even think that the cape would be detachable. But it doesn't look to be the case. Maybe it's, yeah, you probably would be able to pry this off. But I think if anything, you probably would damage the plastic on the inside of it. But that just plugs on top of itself and then fits in place like that. Unfortunately, they've only few times that I've done this has warped. I don't want to say warped, but it's caused the plastic not to stay completely in place like it did the first time. Obviously, you don't want to keep undoing this because you're going to have a harder time to get everything to stay together. Shredder's head sculpt, though, going back quickly to that, using basically the same plastic silver as they used for the axe. So if you're looking at the two, they're almost identical to one another. And they also mimic that nice plastic on the armor for the shoulders. He's also got it there on his arm guards there as well that have these big giant spikes. Look at the spikes on the sides of the armor here. And he also has not the longest of spikes. So if you really wanted him to be the Shredder, it really would have been nice if these could have been just a little bit longer. I mean, obviously they're softer plastic anyway, so it's not going to be doing any damage. I just wish that they could have made them just a little bit longer to drive home the idea that the guy's the Shredder after all. Any one of these look to be removable. It's just a case probably that you'd be able to slide these off his arms, and then this would basically just also slide off too. Or you probably could just detach the shoulders and slide these off. But like, why would you start to want to dismantle anything really on Shredder? That's the whole thing. That's the charm that gives the character his look anyways. I also like the way they've colored the eyes. The brighter red eyes, and then you've got the darker black around it. Boy, does that ever really pop. It's enough of Shredder that you know right away who the character is. By the way, you can't remove his face, by the way. If you were to remove his face, you'd basically be removing his entire head in the process. Everything is all as one piece. It just attaches onto the top via the ball joint. I love the coloring of the purple. The purple works really well, surprisingly, with the blue. And the colors are, as a whole, collectively look really good for Shredder. Really happy that I did get the chance to pick this guy up. The only thing, unfortunately, again, about it is that the cape, the only few times that I've done this, now the cape just doesn't want to stay properly in place. You just want to make sure you kind of get your thumb in there to snap everything back in place. Probably don't do what I just did and detach the cape, because like I said, it just never stays as well as it did the first time I got this out of the packaging. You really have to kind of put pressure on it. Maybe it's going to stay a little bit better this time. For the figure's articulation, though, it's pretty much going to be all the same as what normal Master Universe figures would have. So that articulation would be, you got your ball joint. It does rotate the head all the way around. Shredder's head does look down quite a lot, actually. It looks up and also back and forth as well. But the benefit of giving him so much clearance inside his head like this means that there's a lot that you can really do when it comes to the head movement. I just love that head sculpt, though. Shoulders do come out, and I was actually surprised to see that even though he had large shoulder pads like this, and he also had the armor there on the front of his body, that it doesn't seem to limit at all the ability to be able to move his arms at 90 degrees. You can take those arms as well and rotate them all the way around. Figure has a swivel in his, not his bicep necessarily, but he has a swivel here in his forearm. You can also hinge the arm back and forth. The only downside, unfortunately, because he now has all the spiked armor here for his gauntlet, it really does make basically bending his elbow here null and void. Can't really do anything at all with it. Hands rotate, though, all the way around. The figure does have a waist swivel. Legs do split out. You take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. He has a single hinge only in the knee, allows the lower leg to rotate back and forth. And again, because he's using Hordak's feet, it wasn't even just Shredder that was the problem. Even my original Hordak, and I think also Buzzsaw Hordak, had probably the hardest time just getting these feet to move properly. The feet were extremely tight, getting them out of the packaging, and it caused also, because he had the weight of the cape on the back of the figure's body too, caused him to lean back a lot. So what I, again, had to do was take this off, heat this with hot water, and finally I was able to get the joint to move a lot easier than what it was before. But yeah, I don't know, just based on these kind of feet, the feet just never seem to give him proper stability. He has at least the benefit of the peg holes in the bottoms of his feet, so if you did want to use a display stand, even though I don't tend to use display stands when it comes to Masters figures, I suppose you could if you wanted to. Shredder is an awesome looking figure. He's exactly what I would want for a Masters Shredder to look like. And yet, bring back in the original Skeletor here so you guys can see the two side by side. You know, again, like the fact that they took a Shredder character and threw him back to the days, I don't even want to say threw him back to the days, because it's not like Eternia takes place in the past, but the fact that they gave him Eternian elements, and yet still looks enough like Shredder, he also looks like a lot like the original Playmates Shredder, and maybe that's the reasoning why I feel like there's a lot of charm when it comes to designing of this character. I love him a lot more than maybe the Turtle figures, and again, like, I don't think the Turtle figures are bad at all. I mean, I think the Shredder is part of Wave 2, and I think maybe just Wave 2 as a whole, it's just going to be a better wave than maybe we got with the first. The first wave had good contenders to it. I mean, I like the look of the Man-at-Arms, and even He-Man were really great looking figures. But based on what we're seeing here, I mean, we're getting a Beastman sort of in samurai armor. We're getting a Ram-Man Funny, we're getting a Ram Man Raphael, and we're also getting a Ram Man, like a mutated Ram Man, which is kind of like what we got with the first wave, because we did get ourselves, not necessarily a mutated version of it, but we got Duncan, and then we also got Donatello sort of sporting similar armor. They seem to have kind of carried over the same sort of idea here with Wave 2. Shredder, though, if you get the chance, and you're kind of on the fence as to whether you really want to start delving into the Turtles of Grayskull line, if anything, I would say pick up the Shredder. You won't be disappointed if you get this guy as part of your collection. Well, we now just have to wait and see if Shredder ends up betraying Skeletor in favor of Hordak. I have to think that maybe the parts that they use from Hordak are more just out of convenience than anything else. If he's, after all, someone that knows ninjutsu, then things like a crossbow probably would make the most sense. Hordak just happened to have a crossbow, so that's probably one of the reasons why they included that accessory. As for his boots, though, that kind of had me wondering. I mean, obviously giving him monster feet made little to no sense, but they probably could have easily given him also He-Man's boots, just your traditionally laced kind of style boots that he and some of the other Masters characters have had in the past, but I guess they wanted to give him somewhat more crazier looking footwear, and maybe Hordak probably just made the most sense. So I think a lot of those is just more speculation on my part. I'm sure he's probably just going to align himself with Skeletor. You never know. We'll just have to kind of wait and see as some of the mini comics progress in the future waves. Now, already as announced, or at least they've teased online, that the next wave is going to be, again, Michelangelo, Teela, Skeletor, and Casey Jones. Casey Jones might be an interesting one to see what they're going to do with the design of him. And up to now, I've really had no idea what they had planned for Skeletor, but now, based on at least what we've seen in this mini comic, I think Skeletor is going to be a really interesting figure when we eventually get him in Wave 3. Back, though, to Shredder. I like the colors that they chose here for Shredder, kind of evoking a little bit of the memories of Playmates Shredder. The fact that he also is shirtless, I guess you could give him the option of having a removable armor if you really want to give him the full look of Playmates Shredder. But I like the silvers, I like the blues, and I love the purples. They all work really well to give Shredderhead that perfect element, the combination of both the way that he looked in the original Turtle comics and the way he would look if he existed in Eternia. The included accessories. The big battle axe is by far my favorite thing that comes included with the figure. Yeah, from head to toe, or well, from head to about his shin guards. I really like the look of the figure. I don't still love the fact that they gave him Hordak's boots, because again, like they're always the one wobbly thing I've noticed with the Master Universe figures. It's Hordak's feet. Always have given me really problems. But other than that, really like the way that Shredder turned out. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. Have you guys yet had the chance to collect any of the Turtles of Grayskull figures? Or could you guys see yourselves getting Shredder? Definitely, if you're even on the fence, or you want to be very selective as exactly who you really want to be picking out from this line, pick out by far the Shredder. You won't be disappointed by him. But if you guys did hopefully not be disappointed by this review, want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and certainly do want to stick around for more, we are still going to be looking at Ram Man, we are going to be looking at Raphael, and we are also going to be looking at Beastman. Those reviews will be coming in the upcoming videos. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.